and sharing screen. I'd just like to welcome everyone, those here in person and those virtually. Hi. Welcome to BCS's Embrace Funding Innovative Ventures event. We have a whole lineup for you today. We've got a keynote, workshop, and a panel conversation. The sequence is in the calendar invites you've all seen and the information received in your email confirmations. I'm going to kick off with the actual welcome and then talk through BCS Embrace, give you just a little bit of a headline as to who we are before we go into the actual fundraising masterclass in about 5 minutes. So again, apologies for starting slightly later than scheduled. Technology has not been our friend today. But I'm Msd UK. Welcome again to BCS Embrace. What we do at the BCS is we are a membership body that makes IT good for society. So we work with, is it showing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, it's not showing here. Okay, if we can show here as well.
Okay.
We work with the local community, government, non-governmental organizations to allow initiatives that would make technology a lot more efficient for society and a lot more inclusive. At Embrace, specifically, we are working with the racial diversity lens. So the focus we have is on helping to promote a more equitable IT sector. The BCS Embrace has been since December 2020 by a team of volunteers that are BCS and non-BCS members, but the BCS organization itself has been around since 1967. On the next slide, next slide.
Oh, that's
cool. This outlines what we are actually going to talk about today. And I'm going to go right into the fundraising masterclass, which is on the next slide. A little bit about me. I'll just give a quick introduction, just to give some context. Next slide. So I work in corporate finance. That's the agenda. You can click on to the next slide. Brilliant, thank you. If it's easier, let me take that and do it myself. Okay. Thank you. What I do within the technology space is support startups with fundraising, strategy, governance. I do some angel investing myself, helping companies that are looking to raise some money from pre-seed to Series A. Outside of my day job, I also work with a couple of third sector organizations, helping them with just creating inclusive environments. So an active participant in this space. The cloud to the right just demonstrates a little bit of the things that I've done within my sort of career history, if you like. So worked within investment banking and asset management initially before moving on to the technology space. So here at Wyra, I used to work a year ago. I was here for 3 years, contracting and supporting the portfolio companies within the Wyra UK hub as a part of the Telefonica Ventures Open Innovation arm. With the specific masterclass, I wanted to talk through when one decides to raise capital, what are the key things you have to run through? Now, this will be quite rapidly paced, but it starts within. You first, as a founder or business owner, need to think through what you need the capital for. What are the moving parts of your business that you can unlock additional value by getting additional capital into your company? So you look at how much money you need, what sort of runway. Ideally, you want to fundraise for an 18 to 24-month period, so you don't have to repeat the whole exercise, which can be quite a time sink, and it takes founders away from management, from running companies, from the actual business of just scaling while doing the work of fundraising. So you think through all those activities so that you don't have to go back into the capital markets for at least 18 months, up to 24 months if possible. When you're mapping out the capital need, you also need to think through what type of capital is required. So there are different types of capital providers. There's a slide later on, we'll go through that, breaks that down in more detail. But you need to think through what the nature of capital is in order to match that with the stage, sector, and other dynamics of your business. If there's a mismatch, it's wasting your time and the investor's time. Think about the milestones you'd achieve with that capital that's allocated to your business. And once you've decided to raise capital, the next phase is to think through how to go through a fundraising process. I've broken down in simple steps what good looks like. What I've done over my career is support several companies, as I mentioned, with the fundraising, and this is the format I tend to use. So the first step, investor mapping, as I alluded to in the preceding slide, is where you break down all the investors that are on your target list, those that can actually allocate capital to your business. Figure out what stage they are in their fund lifecycle. If it's a venture capital fund, you need to make sure that they are actually deploying capital and not just scouting. If they are actively deploying, then obviously add them to your long list. You want to also think about those that are close to you, those that you have, second-degree relationships with or first-degree relationships with. Investors frequently go through their network to make capital placements. Most of the successful fundraisers were either through direct introductions or people that the investors already knew. Sending cold emails is as bad as not trying at all. So to save time, recommendation when doing the investor mapping, think about the degrees of separation, who can give you a warm introduction, how you can get the attention of the VC. So coming to an event like this, for instance, I know some of you are online, some are here, there are investors in the room. You want to build some connections. Last year there was an event where a virtual meeting took place and that succeeded in a successful fundraise after the fact. Once you finish the investor mapping, the next stage is getting your portfolio company ready for investment. So doing things like preparing a data room, a teaser, all the presentation decks, keep it short. Most investors receive at least 5 pitches, 5 cold emails a day, some many more, depending on how popular the fund is and what the track record has been. If you have anything longer than 3 minutes, don't send it. If you have a 1-pager as a teaser, that could be your opening calling card. The rest of the material you have in your data room is preempting a due diligence process. But just get ready so that if there's any interest, you are already at the point of being able to go back to back with the things you need to show to potential investors. Next is pitching. Thankfully, places are opening up. So most of the pitches are taking place in person. That's not to say you can't pitch virtually. If you have opportunities to pitch virtually, do take them. Pitching is all about being concise, as I mentioned earlier, having those elevator pitches that can communicate the key aspects that you've summarized in getting ready. So your traction to date, the team that's going to be the killer team to take your business to the next level, the USP, if there is a moat around your business, something that makes it slightly more unique. If you have any other investors that have committed, you also want to disclose that. It helps when investors see other investors that are interested. No one really wants to be the first or the only one participating on a deal. If you don't have additional interest, then wait until you have considerable momentum with the fundraise before approaching the bigger players. You can work with advisors for introductions. Advisors can add value if they have warm relationships with the investors in mind. Then the next phase after pitching, if you're successful, all you want to do really is get to the next meeting, no more than that. It never happens that you have one meeting and an investor says, the best thing since sliced bread, here's a blank check, put any number of zeros around that. You would have many more meetings. They would have to take you back to the investment committee, to their husbands or wives, if it's an angel investor, their partners, to figure out, okay, I've seen this, what next? And all you're trying to do at each stage is not get a no. Most investors would not outrightly say no. They might, if unsure, delay making a decision until they have other data points that either confirm they should proceed or not proceed. So if investors are using delay tactics, try and nudge gently, not in an arrogant sort of way that, oh, you're missing out the best thing, but just remind every so often. Going through the process of due diligence involves meeting other participants. If it's a VC, other participants in the investment committee, other principals, other individuals that can support with that decision-making process. And each time, again, like I said, you just want to get to the next stage, have all the information that's required, and you need to be specific with responding to the queries that the investor might have around your business. And then the final stage is the drawdown. This process takes anywhere from 60 days to a year on average, depending on if you're focusing on angels that are slightly more agile or VCs. VCs would typically take about 9 months. Not ideal to try raising when you only have a month runway, unless you have a really strong relationship, because it will take a while. The reality on the right-hand side, the graph is a little bit more like Brownian motion. You have a slightly more agile process. It's not quite waterfall for those that are programmers. The fundraising process, think of it as an IT project that's agile. You go forward a step, maybe forward another step, go back one, go forward again. And each time you revise some assumptions you've made, you improve aspects of your pitch, presentation, take feedback constantly, and use it to get closer to closing. On the next slide, just going to quickly talk about the, okay, the slide is not opening. Do you mind moving to the next slide? I wanted to just highlight what a good teaser looks like. So we've talked about the different phases of items you need to show to your investor. The opening card, I mentioned the teaser earlier, and on the screen, you can't see the screen in the room, sorry, but if you're on Zoom, please click on the link and you'll see the screen. We had some technical challenges, so we're doing a hybrid. So log into your Zoom screens on your phone and you see the screen I'm talking about. That's a simple summary of what a good deck, a good teaser note looks like. One page highlights the key aspects of your solution. You don't go into detail of the operations. It's more around just what's your USP, what's the value add, how much traction you have to date, include the financials. You need to have some detail around the financials. So if your business is already operational, have 1 or 2 year historical financial data. And then 2 years forecast is sufficient, because that information is what you will use to have those conversations with investors who are looking at financial returns. So that's a quick summary of what a good deck looks like. And I'll move on to the next slide. I alluded to capital providers earlier. This slide is a little bit busy, but if you think of it as a matrix where the amount of money you're trying to raise is at the top column, and then the type of capital provider on the left-hand side. What I've broken down here is, it's kind of different strokes for different folks, right? If you are raising smaller amounts of money, you'd be typically looking at grant funding, perhaps accelerators, or angel investors, those that would support with writing smaller checks. They tend to be more agile, more nimble. If it's a larger checks, then you'd be looking at institutional capital, VCs, etc. So deciding at the very beginning, remember, when you're going to raise capital, how much time you have, and what type of investor is a match is critical, so that you then determine where you fall within that capital provider matrix, and then you move on with engaging with investors within that allocation. So the next slide, we'll quick things to think about if you're approaching different types of investors. So with grants, it's typically non-dilutive capital. And this is really good for companies that are building solutions that require a little more R&D, a little more risk to be taken off the table. Many investors would want to see a degree of traction. Grant funding, especially in critical areas, are supported by government agencies. So if you're able to get grant funding, it also increases your valuation floor as you have secured government funding. It's actually harder to secure grant funding. I have a friend who has raised literally millions in grant funding, and she's amazing. And she doesn't get investors, but she's able to secure grant after grant for her innovative business ideas. And I say to her, look, listen, you're doing the harder bit. When you want to come to VC, let's work on, just simplifying it and focusing on raising VC or angel money. Development finance institutions typically focus on emerging markets. I know we have a few people on the call that are international. The DFIs have core focal areas that, based on either ESGs or UN SDGs, so those are environment, social governance, or UN Sustainable Development Goals. They would allocate pots of capital to seed a market and to push innovation in a particular area that can help further development. That's tied into impact. The VCPE bucket is less about impact and more about return. Although you find some VCs that would say they're looking at impact, some call it greenwashing, but they're generally not going to compromise on ROI just because your business is saving the planet. It has to do both. Debt is an alternative for companies that have some steady degree of cash flow. If you have suppliers or clients that are already paying on your monthly recurring revenues or ARR, and you have clients that are investment grade, so your clients are large institutions that are rated quite highly, then it's easier to get a bank loan. Or if you have assets, a bank loan will not come through if you're just a startup with an idea. It rarely does. In the UK, there's the Simon Wilson Trust, which is based in the city. It's a mix of an impact-focused trust and a sort of startup grant loan structure. And they write small checks in the form of loans to small businesses that are based in the city around the square mile. So it's worth looking out for that if you are still trying to, go beyond the initial stages and all the other options aren't available to you. I was going to play a video, but I'm not going to try technology now. I'll respect myself and move on to the next slide. And I was going to just run through a couple of case studies. Continuing to play. It's all right, if you don't mind moving to. I was going to talk through a couple of case studies, which are about founders scaling from, seed to Series A. Some good and bad and mixed. So the first I want to talk about is the sort of Fast and Furious Conga. They were growing so rapidly that their success almost became a burden because they grew so. What Conga does, by the way, for those that aren't aware, they are like an Amazon. So this is like a West Africa-focused platform that allows people to buy products online and have it delivered to their door. Now, when they were growing so rapidly, they had to get logistics sorted out. When it comes to the value chain in many emerging economies, you can't focus on just one aspect. You need to look at vertical integration. You need to look at other aspects if you want to stabilize or control the quality of what it is you offer to your customers. Now, with them having to get into the logistics space and managing properties and landlords in Nigeria being what they are, it provided additional layer of challenges that pushed the company to bankruptcy. Not because the company wasn't operating efficiently, but because the rents and the changes in rents, where you have to pay a year's rent up front, for example, just make the unit economics unsustainable. And they then ended up being acquired by, by another company at a distressed sale. The next slide is a more positive story. So a couple of years ago, obviously at the beginning of COVID, a little company known as Hopin started to grow. It had raised some capital, but was providing a service that made events a lot more interactive online. The customer dynamics meant that they grew rapidly. The user numbers were quite impressive. Sorry, do you want to answer? No. They were quite impressive, and it resulted in them getting to $1 billion valuation in the shortest amount of time. I think they've broken the record. Exactly. A company getting to unicorn status within 6 months. The next company that scaled, wanted to use as an example, is a company that is from here. It's one of the Wire portfolio companies, actually. So Charged Up, pre-COVID, had just closed a round. What they do is provide a solution with for those that have mobile devices and run out of battery. So it's like a Boris bike for chargers. Some of you may not know what Boris bikes are, but it's a portable battery charger you can pick up from a pub and drop off at the supermarket and so on and so forth. So you don't have to think about taking your charger everywhere with you. You pay £1 rental and then have not a disposable, a reusable power bank that you can drop off at your next destination. They had signed up hundreds of stores, shops, malls, pubs across the UK and internationally. And COVID hit, so guess what? The revenues of several thousands of pounds overnight went to zero because nobody was going anywhere. But the lads behind Charged Up had a clever idea, and they switched, because what do they have? Within their arsenal, they had access to lots of venues. They had that distribution network. So they switched from Charged Up to Cleaned Up. And what they now provide is sanitizing stations across all their locations. And the revenues picked back up within a couple of months and was even more than the initial revenues pre-COVID. I don't know where they are now, but that story I thought was phenomenal. So those are some examples, and I know we're running out of time. I'll just quickly talk through some shortcuts and some ideas to think about when raising capital. You need to weigh the cost of doing it yourself versus getting an advisor or someone that can support you through the process. If you haven't raised money before, there's a very steep learning curve, which some entrepreneurs are happy to do, and they do it very well once they get into the swing of things. But it takes you away from your company. So figure out if it's something you want to invest in yourself or have additional support with an advisor or someone else that has done it a few times before. It's a big world, a small world at the same time. I mean, the big world is summarizing that there are so many investors, and nobody I know got a yes the first time. You go through several no's, but all you need is that 1 or 2 or 3 yeses to fund your company. You don't need to take any no's personally. There'll be quite a few until you find the right match. It's like a marriage, right? You, unless if you're polyamorous, want to focus on finding the individual. Small world in the context of the community of investors is quite connected, and people talk. So you can't be as anonymous as you might want. If you're creating a bad reputation with some investors, it's likely that other investors would hear about that too. So think about maintaining a professional A game each time you meet anyone in the ecosystem, because bad news travels fast. So you want to make sure that those that are within spaces you are going to frequent have a good impression of you and your capacity. Other 2 things here, deal value versus the time value. As I keep saying, it takes you away from your company. So figure out how much of that will impact your company in terms of pounds and dollars. What that translates to, you weigh up with, should I just focus on building my business that would generate X amount of money, or should I take time out and raise capital? So taking time out to raise a small amount of money, I wouldn't really advise. It has to be worth it for the time value that you're sacrificing away from your company. And not all money is good money. There's some investors that might just not be a good fit for your company. So think about it in the sense of it's a two-way street. It's a marriage. They're selling themselves to you in as much as you're selling yourself to the investor. The investor is looking for somewhere to park their capital that will yield them, something bigger than base rate or, the bank interest rate. Your company could be that 10xer for that particular investor. So there has to be that fit. You need to think, can that investor add value to my venture? Do you have the right chemistry? Do they resonate with your company values, the company culture? You don't want to take money and have an investor calling you every 5 minutes to ask you what's happening with X and Y. It's like, stay out of my business. I will manage things. So not all money is good money. I wanted to quickly talk through the funding landscape in the UK. It's quite positive. So if you're here in the UK, well done. If you're not, move over. We have a lot of capital that's looking for good companies to allocate into. So you can see this graph. I got this from Tech Nation. It just summarizes, it stops at the second half of 2021, but even at the end of 2021, we hit new records with respect to fundraising across all kind of tech verticals, or most tech verticals. So from seed, pre-seed, Series A, etc. The other slide captures the parts of the world. And the reason I thought it's worth including is we have a VC dialing in from New York a little later on. So the next slide captures VC investments by city and how that kind of plays out according to Tech Nation. Tech Nation is releasing a report tomorrow looking at the state of play for the UK, state of the nation, the last 10 years of tech funding, innovation, growth in the UK. That's it for now. Sorry that we had some technical issues earlier. I would like to invite questions, perhaps from in here first, and then we can figure out how to get some questions from online.
How do you approach, when you're at early stage with a lot of risk on technical feasibility?
Yes.
What's a good strategy to approach angel investors? Because there's no really end, it's a technology potentially that's creating the market as opposed to integrating one or disrupting one. It's actually opening up a kind of new solution to an existing and growing problems.
Yeah.
How do you convince someone to invest in your company with hardly any potential financial projections and ROI?
Yeah.
More than a dream than an actual constructed business plan, but you can't really build that business plan yet before you de-risk it.
True. Good question. And I mean, there are probably several answers to this. How I would play this if I were in that entrepreneur's shoes is find investors that already understand the problem you're trying to solve. Because angel investing is really personal. You're not answering to an investment committee. You might answer to your partner at home, for those that disclose what they're investing, but it's around what personal convictions the angel investor has. And they have to understand what your company does. Angel investors particularly can't afford to just be, in my view, just cash. It has to be cash plus. The support angels give to startups makes a whole lot of difference because at that early stage, so many things founders do not know, right? So, and this could be basic to the more seasoned business person, but to a company that's young, maybe fresh out of uni or a couple of years into work experience, you need many more data points or leverage of somebody else's experience to support your growth. So in that particular example, I'd say someone that has a deep understanding of the problem or of the funding landscape, because if an angel is putting money in, there has to be a point that they take money out, right? So backing a company is more than just, oh, I believe you'll grow, but it's belief in the company's ability to create a future exit or liquidity event for you. Because you don't just want the company to get to a stage that they aren't able to get future capital to allow you to a full or partial exit, or where they just keep on going without providing any return. You don't get dividends as an angel investor. You might get some consultancy fees, but those are peanuts. It has to be a liquidity event. So those are the things I'll consider for such participation. Sure.
So sorry, we are late because we were waiting downstairs.
I apologize.
So could I actually know your background so that maybe my question will be different?
Sure. So my background is varied, a few hats, but a bit of an entrepreneur and an investor.
Yeah.
And I have a TV show.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm Japanese, moved to
Sure.
London, and then I'm
Konnichiwa.
doing basically hard to find dishes and grocery delivery platform right now.
Mhm.
And the comparable company in the US, valuation is $4.9 billion. And our attraction is
Let me give this, because the people on the phone aren't able to hear you
Cheers.
without.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm Toshi, by the way, and we do hard to find additions groceries delivery platform across the UK. And basically, I'm Japanese. I'm not in the circle yet, and but our attraction is good, a few million, and then also unit economics is good, and potential is good because the comparable company in the US has already valuation 4.1 billion. And how can I reach out to the right investors because I'm not in the circle yet? So that's why I came here like this, and my VC partner that I know of suggested me to come here like this, But what would you recommend to reach out to the right investors if I'm outside the circle?
Yeah. Yeah, no, good question. And the reason I showed my network earlier, sorry you missed the initial bit, but it's because part of my superpower is my network, and part of everyone's superpower is their network and access to networks, right? It will take some time to build that sort of degree of relationships and the trust, etc. So leveraging off those that might have it in the interim is a recommendation. You can do that through hubs like this. So if you have a B2B solution, getting into an accelerator, I don't mean to sell Wyra, I no longer work with Wyra, but they have a very strong ecosystem and connections with not just investors, but also people within the industry that will support you with some business development and building capacity within your entity. Carolina as well from Msd UK runs another accelerator that also builds, of course I have to mention it, that also builds those networks for you to help you to access those networks if you haven't got them on your own. Because it does take some time. But if you're already doing a few million in revenue, that's pounds, not yen, or?
No, it's like dollars.
Dollars, we'll accept dollars. A few million in revenue is very impressive.
Grocery is pretty good as well.
Fantastic. Let's talk after this, but there'll be lots of people that will be keen to learn more about how they can be part of that story, that growth story. So well done. Thanks, Toshi. Any final questions? We could probably take 2 more questions before we, and do you mind checking if there are any questions online? Sorry, maybe they're not in the chat. Okay, cool. Thanks.
My question would be around angel investors. So how much time would you suggest investing, finding the right angel investors? Because you said finding the investors who understand the problem. And well, the business area where I am, not many will understand them. So how much time would you suggest putting in, and when it would be right, when it would be appropriate to close that?
Yeah, good question, but it's hard to, I mean, for each business it'd be different. It's figuring out how much time you can afford to take away from your business without it diminishing your business's viability, right? If you have a strong co-founder that can run things in the interim, then obviously take as much time as you need. But you need to weigh that cost, that time value of money versus the deal to determine how much time you can afford to take your eye off the wheel on your company and raise capital. getting into networks, again, similar to Toshi's question, getting into networks would be going to the spaces that, operators, and you sound like you're disrupting an existing market, right?
Yeah.
So if you go into spaces that you find some of those operators, if you find people that invested in those companies, and that'll start the conversation. There might be pitch competitions in your domain. It's worth entering as many as you can. Not only do they refine your ability to pitch, which is a very key skill to have. Sometimes it's actually arguable that just being able to pitch and raise money can determine how successful your business is versus being able to actually run a company. It's a bit of a, sometimes it's not a good thing all the time, but going through those competitions, as I was mentioning, would give you that opportunity to hone in your pitching skills, as well as potentially expose you to individuals that are looking for opportunities in that domain. So enter as many pitching competitions as you can afford to. One final question, and any questions online? No?
No.
Cool, thank you. We'll take one final question from the floor before I hand over to Carolina, who's going to run us through a case study using the Msd UK. Sorry, do you want to use the microphone?
Yeah, sure. All right, hi, I'm Fazan. I had a specific question that I've mostly seen that the co-founders or the startups that have successfully raised, they have a very good background from these very well-established institutes firstly, and then working in these big companies. So how specific do you think, why do investors are inclined, and if you haven't worked in these big companies, how do you pitch yourself to actually raise money?
Good question, and that's one of the reasons I showed the Hopin example. You're right, there's a bias and a skew towards founders that are, let's call a spade, cisgendered white males, but also who have gone to the right universities, right, FTSE companies, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't tick all those boxes and you're an outsider, then the thing to think about is build a company that's solving a problem, not one that's a multivitamin. Think of painkillers, right? So if there's a real problem you're solving, then automatically people will want to go towards you because that problem itself is something that is clear to them. One caveat, it has to be a problem that's within a market that's sizable. It has to be a market that's worth billions, because you have to be taking a slice of that market in order to grow your TAM, SAM. You need to be in the space that a VC or investor can visualize them, getting 10x. Sorry, go on.
But at a pre-seed,
at a pre-seed level, the valuations are just at the idea level, right? So they're specifically focusing that, is the team worth it in investing that they would actually achieve that? So I do get that, the market has to be of that billion worth for which you actually get the slice out. But then again, they're just focusing on the team, and would they be able or capable? I'm specifically talking about the pre-seed level. I mean, at the seed level, you still have good numbers. If you have numbers and you're actually solving that problem, they'll still be happy to invest. But then investors are very, specific when they're investing at the pre-seed level, very scrutinizing each and everything. So it's very difficult if you're not from these institutions. They're very, what's the right word I'm trying to find? Yeah. They're not very passionate to invest. Right?
They're risk averse, right? I mean, they don't want to lose money, right? They're looking at things that have already de-risked to a great extent. So if you haven't got KPIs or metrics that are suggesting a significant growth curve is on the way, then it's going to be much harder. You need to invest in yourself first. If you take out loans on credit cards, more, whatever, you need to do that to get to the stage that somebody else can back you. You need to believe that 100%. So Johnny, I alluded to earlier from Hopin, he didn't have that pedigree of going to all the right, working in a Google or or Facebook. But he was solving a problem that was seen by investors. His growth numbers were phenomenal, and was able to get capital. So at the pre-seed, figure out, as you're doing your product market fit, if you figure out what KPIs you're going to track and what would make it clear to someone that's knowledgeable about the space, what's going to give them clear evidence that you're going to be the person that's going to do this, then that would help. But otherwise, it's challenging. Even with the with stronger teams and etc. Fundraising is always a challenge.
But thank you very much for explaining in detail and just finalize. But the offline model, for instance, if you're just bringing tech into that certain idea, right, and you're running the offline model, so that traction can help, gain that added advantage for the
I think so.
right?
Yeah. So if you're converting from like a consultancy model or for something else that's generating some revenue, not just only is cash flow coming in that can be invested in that product development, you're building relationships that can convert to the final kind of bigger clients. You're building your reputation, you're building all those things that can support with your future growth and future capital. So yeah, I'll say if you can have a model that's analog, like a kind of MVP pre-straw man before you go on to the, all singing, all dancing tech platform, that would help. I'm afraid that's all I have time for right now. We've run over, but I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Carolina, to give us some information on a fantastic opportunity I think you should all pay attention to. So over to Carolina, please. You get technology to work.
Yes, if you can make it full screen. No, I have to make it full screen. There we go. Could you make it on your end as well?
Oh.
On the computer here, yeah.
Okay. So as we're sorting all of that out, I will introduce myself. My name is Carolina. Hello to everyone online. Hello to all of you in person. And I'm here from a company called Msd UK. The acronym stands for Minority Supplier Development UK. And what we do is we connect ethnic minority-owned businesses with opportunities from the corporate world. And an initiative or a pitching competition that I want to talk to you about is called Innovation Challenge. That's our logo right here. We're currently accepting applications for the program. So if you are a founder, if you are working in sustainability, and if you are interested in connecting with the corporate, I would love to have a chat and connect with you. There we go, it's full screen now. And I'll grab my laptop so that I can change the slides. I think I will try to play a video. I'm feeling very brave today. So let's see how that works out.
Msd UK Innovation Challenge is not just a pitching competition. The key element is the access to the network of industry leaders, exposure to the global corporate community, and support aimed at innovative ethnic minority founders.
Msd UK will look after you. When I mean look after you is creating an enabling environment for you to thrive as an individual and as a business. For an entrepreneur, an enabling environment is having someone to speak to, having connections to people that can actually help you, having access to customers, giving you training.
The network has become a community. All of the other founders and corporates, I see them as friends and colleagues as opposed to another contact in another business.
and some of the businesses that have won the competition or have grown through the network and stayed with us. And if I go to... so the competition Innovation Challenge has been running for 5 years now, and we're super excited to be opening up for applications again. As I said, the theme is sustainability, and there are a few categories that are part of the competition. So the first one, if you're interested in applying, the first category is environmental category. So we're looking for businesses that have solutions that can help corporates be more environmentally friendly. And we loosely understand that because you could be working in the area of sustainable packaging, recycling, green energy, managing waste, eco-friendly products. If that's something that you do, we definitely want to hear from you. Another pillar that you could apply for is a social pillar. And here we are looking for products or solutions that can improve the well-being of corporate employees, corporate customers, or their wider community. So if you have a solution that helps improve human resources processes, mental health, medical devices, or even education, that category is for you. And then finally, economic pillar, we're looking for businesses that have solutions that can increase or efficiency of a corporate in a sustainable way. So for example, if you are helping with resource management, maybe improving customer loyalty, or you can open up new market opportunities, that category is for you. And the timeline is, that's the most important day. First, the 31st of May is when we close application. And the second most important day is on this side, is the finals. So if you get to go and pitch during the finals, you will be part of the Msd UK conference, which is our biggest event in the year. We invite all of our corporate network, and we invite all of our ethnic minority businesses. So it's a great exposure. Every year for the conference, we attract over 500 people. It takes place in London. It's a fantastic event. I think this is the most exciting part. So if you were to win the competition, the cash prize for the overall winner is £20,000. There's also some mentoring with Accenture. It's a great program. We've been running it for a few years now. What happens is you will be mentored by a senior leader within Accenture for 12 to 18 months. And finally, to all of the winners of Innovation Challenge, we do give them a 1-year free membership with us. What that means essentially is you get a bit longer to get to know the network and continue working on the relationships that you've managed to secure during the finals. But that's not everything. Our corporate sponsors, and I do have them here, but they're unfortunately covered, but we've got Cummins, EY, GSK, and Accenture. They are sponsoring the competition, and they also wanted to have an opportunity to recognize those applicants who maybe didn't make it to win, but they have a great potential. So for those companies, we do have 3 special awards. So when you apply for a pillar, you will be automatically considered, and you can win £2,000 from one of our corporate sponsors as well. So these are the prizes. And in terms of the eligibility criteria, so Msd UK support ethnic minority founders. So to take part in the competition, you must be one of the 3. So either an ethnic minority business, so that means that you have an ethnic minority founder who owns 51% or more. But we do recognize that when you raise investment, you sometimes need to dilute. So that means that if you are an ethnic minority controlled business, you could also be considered for the competition. What that means is that if you are an ethnic minority founder and you control the majority of the business, you're the key decision maker, you could still be eligible. And finally, if we have any freelancers in the room, you can also apply. You must be a UK resident or be on the visa. I don't know, I doubt, but we might have in the virtual audience, if there is anyone from Europe listening to the pitch, you could still apply, just talk to me and we can review it on case by case. And we would love to hear from people who do have an MVP in place and are particularly interested in working with the corporates, because that's where we can offer the most value. And with that, I'll stand on this side because the QR code will take you to the application page where you can find out a bit more about the competition and submit your application. I'll be here around. I'll drop my email in the chat as well if you would like to speak to me afterwards. Yeah, reach out, let's have a chat. I would love to speak with you or see your application coming. So thank you.
Do you have any questions for Carolina? Any questions from the audience? So,
does the business need to be UK or outside UK?
So, if you are registered,
I'll just repeat the question for the people online. You talked about, you asked if the visas,
So
the business has
to be in. Hello, yeah. I'm asking if for instance, let's say recycling, for instance, must it be within UK or maybe Europe or in Africa?
so at the moment, if you are registered in the UK, that makes it a lot easier. I think if you are registered in Europe, let's have a chat and we would have to review it on case by case. And as UK, we're expanding to Europe, but it's in the early stages, so that's why we opened it up. But at the moment, it's just Europe and UK.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? There you go.
There you go, Ishna.
I'm just wondering, so the winner is overall competitive of the 3 categories or each category?
Exactly. So from the 3 pillars that I talked about, there will be 3 people chosen on the day of the final, and from those 3, the overall winner who gets the big prize money will be chosen. Okay, I think that's it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Glenn Elliott, and I'm entrepreneur in residence at Tenzing Private Equity. I've been working at Tenzing for the last few years, but my real job was I was an entrepreneur for the last 20 years. My history is I started, maybe like some of you, with a computer science degree way back in 1992, which I got from London South Bank University, where I was very happy. I then did 10 years at BT, British Telecom, the phone company. That was my corporate career. Learned a lot at BT, had a really great time, spent most of my time there in software testing, project and program management, and learned a lot about tech. And then I left BT in 2002. I set up a web development and design agency, and I spent about 7-8 years running that, got it to about 20 people, about £1 million turnover, just about breaking even, living hand to mouth, learning a lot about cash flow management and trying to keep clients happy and trying to keep the kind of ship just about sailing on rocky ground, as many of you will know if you're starting out entrepreneurs. When I was kind of reaching maybe 7-8 years at the agency that I was running, I realized that, you know, running a web development agency, you're selling time, and it's really hard to scale the idea of selling time. People always tend to want to work with a founder or the more senior staff, and selling time is really difficult to scale. It's consultancy. So I really wanted to take everything I'd learned about marketing and sales and design in my time there, plus everything I knew about technology, and bring those skills to another market where I could build a product that would be a SaaS product that I could sell again and again to new customers. And that's how I founded my business that became known as Reward Gateway. Reward Gateway is an employee engagement technology business now. Back in those days when I started it, it was in a slightly smaller segment, which was employee benefits. And I think that's the first thing that's worth saying, actually, is in terms of technology and innovation. When I started that business, the industry of employee benefits was not new, it'd been around for many decades, but it was sleepy and it did not involve much technology. And what I did that was unique in that industry was to bring some very modern technology to it, to reinvent that market. And it wasn't just the technology on product that I brought to it, we brought a fresh approach to marketing and sales, and that's what really made it successful. Now, I said that I work in private equity now, and I ended up in private equity through the Reward Gateway route. So I think quite a lot of you have not yet taken on institutional money. So you haven't yet raised money from VCs and things like VCs and funds. And I didn't either. So my business was completely bootstrapped. We was a group of 5 founders, and between us, we managed to get £50,000 together on credit cards and bank loans to set the business up. And that's all we had to start the business. And it was enough. We managed to build our first product and tech. Then we then outsourced to India to build that. This was back in about 2007. And very simply, we got a product built, sold it to a customer, used the money from that customer to build a bit more, to sell to the second customer, used the money from that to build a bit more, sell to the third customer. And that's how we went on. And that kind of very thin funding approach really, really forced us to be very, very lean and very, very tight. And I guess very innovative in everything that we did, because we just didn't have the spare cash to burn. And I think I learned about private equity really by accident when I really first started to think about how to realize the value in my business. I'd got Reward Gateway to revenue of about £7 million, EBITDA profit of about 2.5. And I thought the way to realize that value would be to sell it to another company, what we now call a trade sale. But actually, I found private equity, and private equity, it often gets lumped in with VC, but it's very, very different. VC invests in early stage startup businesses that are pre-profit, sometimes pre-customer, sometimes even pre-product, and it gives money for that business to start and to have cash flow to grow. Private equity buys businesses that are already profitable and are already cash generative, and it actually buys a part of them from the owner, giving that owner liquidity and cash out. But the owner stays a major shareholder in the business. So if you think about it, roughly each time you sell to private equity, you sell about half your shareholding. Interestingly, they give you a bit back to incentivize you to run the business. And I remember being amazed when I sold Reward Gateway for the first time in 2010, and I sold it at a valuation of £25 million. And I had 40% when I sold it then. And actually after the deal, I had 32%. So I kind of sold half the business, but they're giving me some back as an incentive. So I ended up with a shareholding that wasn't that different to what I started with. And I did that twice again. I did it in 2015, sold Reward Gateway again for 140 million. I did it just again last year, sold it for just shy of €500 million, so 480 million pounds it was. So private equity is a really interesting finance system really for you to think about. And we haven't got time to go into all the detail today, but I hope we can investigate it a bit more in the future. I wanted to talk really though about kind of what I've learned about innovation, because the thing which powered Reward Gateway's growth and the reason that we were able to command such high valuations and grow so much was because we grew our profits. And how do we grow our profits? We grew it by being really innovative. And the key thing I've really learned about innovation is you really need to innovate not just on your product and technology, but on all parts of your business. So the best businesses innovate on every axis. So that's sales, customer service, client relations, operations, HR, finance. And that's really what we did at Reward Gateway. We became obsessed with innovation in all of those areas. And it's interesting, it's much more common when we're buying businesses at Tenzing to find a business that has got an innovative product, but may still not have applied those innovations to the rest of departments and functions that are in the business. And that's really what they need to do in order to grow a lot. I think there are two things really that make innovation really happen in an organization. And the key thing really is that there's no one big decision that makes great businesses great. What makes them great is a culture of innovation. And a culture of innovation, I think, needs two key things. It needs, firstly, an obsession with iteration, so constantly keep trying new things. And combined with that, it needs a complete acceptance, maybe even a love or an acceptance of failure, because innovation is not a straight line. You don't go and have 50 ideas and all of them work. and execute them. That's just unfortunately not how things work. What you have is 50 ideas, you execute them one by one, and you iterate, and some of them work and some of them don't. And that's okay. Every single one of them, we call it a failure, but actually they're not. They're just stepping stones to your success. And I think, what's important is to keep that iteration happening, make it constant, or even make it faster, because as you grow, it's very common for people to become more risk averse and for those things to slow down. So the way I think about it is like this, is that every change you make to a product, your technology, your business, your process, how you sell, how you market, your website, everything change you make is an opportunity for progress or an opportunity for learning. So sometimes I think about it as like stepping stones that will help you get across a river. And each stone might take you closer to the other side, or it might not. It might take you sideways, or it might take you backwards. But it doesn't really matter, because from each stone, you're in a new place where you see other stones, and they're what you try next. And the most important thing with innovation is to keep stepping on new stones and not be put off by the ones that take you sideways or backwards. I think in really innovative cultures, what's surprising is that you never get to the finish line, because every step that you take onto a new stone, it helps you to see further. So the goalposts move, your ambition changes, you achieved something, you can now see further what your business could do, what sales could do, what marketing could do, what the product could do. And it's really that culture of kind of constantly driving standards higher that makes businesses great. It's almost like building a ladder to the stars. You're never going to reach the stars, but if you aim for them, you're going to get to a height that no one else has got to before. I think though there's something that people often don't tell you about innovation, and it's this. Innovation isn't just about starting things. It's also about stopping things. Starting things is actually easier than stopping things. Starting things, whether they be a new idea, a new product, a new feature, a new enhancement, a new way of doing something in sales or marketing, a new way of servicing clients. Starting things is exciting and it's fun. Stopping things, it could be a project, a product, a process, a job role, someone's job with your company. It's harder because it often means having tough conversations with people or with customers. And the thing that I see most commonly in the businesses that we invest in, and we invest in businesses that are normally 20, 30 million revenue, maybe 5 to 10 million profits, is that they haven't done enough stopping things and trying new things in their place. It's essential, though, to stop doing things that you've done in the past, because you need to make clear ground for new things as you grow. So I want you to bear that in mind as you think about building your culture of innovation. And I think, whatever your job role is today, and I think many of you are entrepreneurs or founders or maybe technology leaders in startups and companies, I think the biggest gift you can give your organization if you want it to really grow is a culture of innovation, because it's that culture of innovation that really leads to business growth. And I kind of really wanted to end with something I learned from one of our clients. So one of our clients was McDonald's, the restaurant chain. We had them for many, many years in both UK and Australia. And there was a time, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I was sitting with our client at an awards dinner. And I said, how are things going? And he said, well, we want to be more innovative at McDonald's. We've realized that we've been quite slow to try new things out. And I said, so how are you doing that? And he says, well, we're completely changing the language that we use around new ideas and innovation. So in the past at McDonald's, when someone suggested something, we would ask them and ask ourselves, do we think this will work? And we're changing that language now. And instead we're asking, how do we make this safe to try? So that's really interesting. Rather than saying, will this work? How do we make it safe to try? And I think it's really valuable because so many things that you can do to improve your business, your product, your service, your selling skills, they're not actually that dangerous. They may or may not work. Most of them aren't that costly, and most of them can be reversed, or will take you to somewhere where you can try something else. And I think doing that and building that into your business and into your culture and into your teams is really, really big step to building a culture of innovation. So that's really what I wanted to share with you today. So my last message is just to go out there, be innovative, be creative, and be unafraid. and find ways of trying something new every day, and investigate private equity as a way of both owning your business and selling it at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenn. We have a couple of minutes for questions if you have some time, Glenn. Should we?
Certainly.
Questions from the audience and online panel. Any questions for Glenn? Sure, Charlie.
Hi, Glenn.
Yeah.
Just a quick one. Rates of PE, are you still focused on which industry?
I didn't quite hear the question. Could someone closer to a mic repeat it, maybe?
Speak, shout into the mic.
Okay. Then, hi.
Hi.
Which industry are you in within the PE?
Which industry am I in?
Industry predominantly focused on.
So all I heard was which industry am I in? Is that right?
Yeah, predominantly focused on.
So Tenzing Private Equity is focused on tech and tech-enabled services businesses. But if I'm honest, we're in pretty boring technology. So we're not buying exciting things like Spotify that might change the world. We're buying things like payroll companies. We own the UK market leader in bus ticketing. So if you get on a bus outside of London, there's a very good chance that your ticket will come from a machine made by Ticketer. We own a business that helps do private funds administration. We own a business that puts the subtitles and audio tracks onto movies as they leave Hollywood. And that's what we do. So tech and tech-enabled services. All have got recurring revenue. All have got long-term client retention. They've got low churn. And that's the business that we're in.
Okay. Question? Okay. And what multiples are you considering when taking this on board?
What do I consider personally, or what does the fund consider when looking at buying a business? The fund. We're looking at the key things we're looking at is the business profitable? So what's the profit level? Is it cash generative? What's its growth rate for the past 2 or 3 years? What do we think the market potential is? Is the market growing? And is there enough runway in the market for us to see our ownership cycle, which is 5 years, through, and the next owner see through another 5 years? They're the key things that we're looking at. Private equity invests in growing business or growth private equity, which is the part that I'm in, invests in growth businesses which are cash generative and we believe can treble their value in 4 to 5 years. That's the key thing for us.
Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, before I go, you mentioned the revenue. What revenue size have you got your eyes on?
So, we look at profit first. So we're kind of Tenzing. The smallest businesses we buy tend to have profits of about 3 to 5 million per year, and they've probably got revenue of 10, 15, 20 to support that.
So 3 mil profit, give or take
10, 15 million. Yeah, that'd be at the smaller end, and then it kind of goes up from there.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Thanks, Charlie. Any final questions for Glenn? An entrepreneur with multiple exits, and obviously now with Tenzing, PE shop with over $1 billion AUM USD. So he's the man to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask one very key question here. I don't know if you are interested in agro business investment. I've got this partnership that is going on right now in my company and my German-based company partners, and they've come up with this agro innovative investment project, and that's going to be taken up in Nigeria and Ghana with an estimated investment of $1.5 billion with an annual return of about $3 to $5 billion at the end of the investment turnover. And I just want to know if it's an area that would be interested in investing into, however we can share information about this new tech investment, which is focused on growing the export and growing the byproducts of cocoa from Nigeria and Ghana.
Was that a question for me or for the panel?
The question was for you in terms of.
Could you repeat it, Zubi? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear it. So can you give me a little paraphrase?
Specific to agro-allied businesses, if you have an interest in exposure to agriculture in West Africa.
Unfortunately, no, that's not our gig. There'll be some other PE firm that will be right up their street. But for us, we're UK and Northern Europe tech and tech-enabled service only. That's what we do. There's a short answer to a longer question.
No, sure, it's cool. I mean, that's part of the fundraising, looking at investors that match with geography, size, etc. It's quite important. LPs do have restrictions. We have one question in the chat. So, hi, Glenn. This is from William. He comes from a software testing background, running his studio agency, and he wants to know, or they want to know, what were the best and worst decisions you made during your 7 to 8 years running your business?
Oh, I mean, I was a lot younger then, so I made lots of terrible decisions. And it's a little while ago. The first one that springs, so the worst decision I made, it wasn't the end of the world, but it was a bad decision. I remember I was desperate to try and find, actually, sorry, it's not a worse decision. It's just something that didn't work, but it was a stepping stone that took me further. So I should listen to my own talk. I remember, in sales, wanting to get to the next level up of clients that had bigger budgets. So I found a guy who had previously been the CEO of a much, much larger agency about 10, 15 years earlier. And he was a lot older than me. I was probably about 30 at the time. He was probably 50. He's seen much more experience than he said, and I believed him, that, he had this kind of golden contact book of all the people who would be able to buy our services and stuff. And I hired him to be a very expensive chairperson for not that long, about 6 months. And what I found was that was not a shortcut to getting big clients. Whilst he did have contracts with some big companies who bought services like the ones we were selling, they weren't interested in an agency like us, and we just hadn't grown into that space. So that was an idea that I tried, and it didn't work. But what it did do is it was a stepping stone that took me on to hire a different type of business development staff that were closer to what we needed, and it ultimately moved sales on. So that was definitely something that I didn't do. I think the best decision that I made in that time was to give my staff 5% shares in the company, which meant that they all shared in the success of it. So by doing that, I was able to really engage them, and I continued that through my Reward Gateway years too.
We have one more question online from Andre. Andre, if you want to just ask I'll read it out. Sorry. You run an EdTech digital transformation company called Full Spectrum. You've raised more than 700K to date from private investments and grants, and nothing from VC funds, angel syndicates, or PE. Do you know any successful, well, I think it probably answer this to begin with, but yeah, I mean, there are many companies that do end up being successful without raising private equity VC. You can run off your own bootstraps, so to speak, by bootstrapping to growth. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Glenn.
Yeah, I mean, look. Firstly, you're not going to raise money from private equity for a startup. VC invests in startups. Private equity does not invest in startups. Private equity buys existing cash generative profitable businesses. There's a really important thing to know about. There's a huge difference in funding flow. In VC, the money goes into the company's bank account. So if you raise £10 million from a VC, your company is £10 million richer the next day. If you sell your business to private equity for £10 million, the money goes into the founders or shareholders' pockets. It does not go into the company's bank account. So the company is not richer the next day. So that's why private equity can only buy businesses. So basically, private equity buys businesses, VC invests in businesses. Yeah, there's a huge difference. There's an article on the Tending website which I wrote called VC versus PE. What's the difference? And you can read that for the detail. Reward Gateway had no institutional funding, no VC funding, and was ultimately worth £480 million. So yeah, that's the first example of a successful startup that wasn't VC funded.
Thank you. So that distinction between PE and VC. And the final question is from Obi around having difficult conversations then with staff or customers. How do you navigate difficult conversations with your stakeholders?
With honesty, empathy, and kindness, early, not late, don't procrastinate, and don't think of them as difficult conversations, think of them as essential conversations.
Love that. Honesty, empathy, and kindness. And on that note, we'd just like to thank Glenn for his keynote.
Thank you.
We're going to kick off the panel now with Saka and Georgina now joining. So we're going to just spotlight Saka and then hand over to Ayana, who will be moderating the panel. Thank you.
Hi, so welcome everyone to the panel. Here we have Georgina, we have Saka, and we have Max. So as we all know, they're amazing people. Amazing people. Max runs and co-founded our Unity, helping companies access company. Saka is a general partner, lots and lots of experience with Marta and with loads of kind of fintech angel investments across retail portfolio. And Georgina is a founder of Co-Freedoms and Black Girl Startups. So I would love for everyone to kind of introduce themselves a little bit, tell them a bit more. So Saka, if you could go first.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's a little bit hard to hear you, but I believe you asked for me to introduce myself. I'm Saka. I'm the managing partner of Funder VC. It's an early stage fintech focused fund that promotes financial inclusion. And pretty much this leverages my experience as an angel investor and when I worked at QuickBooks and PayPal. I'm originally from Botswana in Nigeria, but currently live in New York City, where I live with my beagle. And yeah, that's currently what I do at the moment. My remit and the reason why I'm part of this is because I want to share more about what it means to actually raise money from a venture capitalist and also the lens with which we look through things. So really excited to be here.
Great, thanks. Georgina, could you tell everyone a little bit more about your background?
Everyone, so just for the people online, you need to speak up into the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Georgina. I am a VC, some lawyer, legal background turned VC, 3 times founder.
Sorry, that was I'm trying to help.
That's right. And I've just launched Academic Ventures following my experience at Pi Labs, which is one of the group's biggest prop tech funds. And during that time, I set myself a challenge to understand the fundraising landscape, especially for diverse founders. And my mission was to put as many diverse founders through and see what happens and why the data says founders are finding it difficult to raise, because I experienced that as a founder myself, and I saw exactly what problems were. And my mission with Academic Ventures is to address those problems and help founders, especially from diverse backgrounds, come back towards fundraise successfully. And several of my founders that I've worked with have now gone on to raise some funding, scale that, and carry on with that. So that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Hi everyone, my name is Maxime Fruggen. I'm the co-founder and director of R&D Community. In short, we specialize in helping UK companies who invest in innovation access a very specific yet valuable form of public funding called the Elliott scheme, which I will share a bit about later on with you. I'm also a casual, and I insist on casual, early stage angel investor. I've invested in 2 companies, one in AI and one in.
All right, perfect. So first question is for Maxime. How can R&D tax credit help tech ventures proactively as opposed to being a retro fund manager?
So, first, maybe I'll give you a very quick rundown of the R&D tax credit scheme for those who don't know. Basically, it's a public program enabled by the government, which allows companies who invest in research and development in technology or science to unlock extra funding for the money they've already spent. So, for example, if you spend £100 on a development project, you could get up to a third back of this, so effectively 30%. So this can be quite potential. Oh, I think 1, 2, I'm back. Okay, bear with me. The sort of things you can claim for in terms of expenditure are salaries, subcontracted costs, software costs, which I think will be interesting for this room. So it can amount to quite substantial terms of cash payments actually from the government. So we're looking at the average claims we get for our clients went from less than £10,000 to £500,000 up to and beyond in some specific cases. So the message I want to get around is look into it if you're not already aware of this program, because it can be a great help for founders at every stages, but especially startup at early stages. One thing in my experience, where I'm always surprised after doing this for 4 or 5 years now, is meeting a lot of founders who don't use the scheme. And the 3 main reasons is, first one, they don't know about it. Second one, they don't think it applies to them, but more often than not, they're wrong about it because they don't really feel it right. And third one would be them being scared about the burden that the process can take. Because founders which are very busy, and it can also be daunting to deal with the government and HMRC. And that's where we come in and we try and provide free expertise and advice. At the end of the day, it's a great tool to invest on. So leading to your questions, how can this be, because the downside of it is you have to spend to get money back from this program. Therefore, if you're raising funds, this can't be your first point of call, but it should definitely be something you keep front of mind for a number of reasons. The first one, as a founder, managing your strategy and your budget, you know that down the line you might be able to extract up to 33% of what you've already spent. So this is quite substantial, gives you maybe some leeway if there's mistakes along the way in the development, or it allows you to foresee a future input of cash from what you've already spent. The second aspect, and what I think in tying with VCs and angel investments, is as a founder, if you want to raise funds, you can point with the potential investor and say, if you give me 100, I can already stretch that budget and extend it with this scheme. And many companies in the sector will be in mind, but not only will give you free assessments of your project to see actually, you look a little bit under the hood of your tech project and think this is most likely going to be eligible. So you can have that free assessment and use this in your conversations and in your funding strategies. And the second aspect is presenting yourself to potential investors and showing them that you already have a business at home and you're already operating a potentially successful vehicle to develop a new technology. So it's really something, and I'll then give the mic, but it's really something I encourage looking into. If you already know about this and don't use it, then do explore and do get the guidance that's very available, and I'll be happy to share some as well. But it's a fantastic program that really has gone a long way for many founders.
Okay, perfect. Next question is actually for Georgina. So how easy or hard is it for entrepreneurs to raise capital through VCs or angels? So we've had a bit of workshop earlier to give a bit of insight, but we want to know what's we can keep in mind when raising capital.
I think in terms of how easy fundraising is hard. I don't think anybody can pretend it's easy. I think the experience I had on the other side of the table, what's really driving me now is the fact that it is hard, but I think a lot of founders come at it from the mindset from a founder mindset. As I said, I was guilty of that. I remember in the process of getting into VC, I met one of the VCs that I'd actually pitched to. And I remember when I pitched, previously I was like, it's brilliant, what's going on? But after becoming a VC, I realized, oh, I absolutely understand why you did not. There's so many factors that VCs are looking for. There's a lot of resources out there. I know founders read it, but I just think that you come at it, if you're a founder, you come at it from my idea, you're very passionate about your idea, and you're focused on your idea, a little bit too much. You need to take some perspective, and one of the things I say is think like a VC. The successful founders that manage to raise think like a VC, because they think of what is the VC looking for. VCs need to make sure that they get their returns, they need to make sure, so they're looking at traction, team, tech, product. If you can bring as many other factors, de-risk it, you stand a better chance. And I think the founders struggle, the founders really come at it with that kind of mindset. And one of the things I would recommend is accelerators and incubators are great, but I spoke to a lot of founders who have been through accelerators and incubators, and many of them didn't understand that fundraising is a completely separate skill, and you need to learn that skill. One thing that you'll learn with VCs is VCs are very good at fundraising because they've got to raise their funds. So it's a skill, it's a completely separate skill. It's one of the things we want to address with back to the founders, which is to teach how to raise funds. You've got to think of positioning, you've got to think of pitching, all of these things. So I would say it's hard, but you can make it a whole lot easier. There is bias, I'm not going to lie, there is bias. But those factors that's in the press, the mainstream media, if you focus too much on them, you're blocking yourself because there's a lot more barriers in front of you that you can eliminate. And if you eliminate those, you put yourself way ahead of the pack. The founders that I was talking about that I've worked with, these are founders that, I had to really coach them all the way. Many of these, they were literally, some of them, they were at the point of losing the deal because they were still coming at it from the founder mindset. I remember there was literally the day before one of our ICs, I had to literally say to this founder, you've got to change your mindset. Because one of the factors we're looking for is coachability. And the minute she got that, she's now gone on to raise 2 million. Just simply from changing that mindset. The business didn't change. She had traction, she had team, but it was just that element that just needed to be tweaked. And the minute she did it, the fundraising was amazing for her. So what I wanted to do is just really get founders to understand. Founder mindset is great for building your startup. You've got to change it when you're ready to come into fundraising. Angels, but VCs, investors want the same thing. They want return. So think like a VC, think like an investor when you're approaching them. And I think you have a lot more success.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Saka. What is the funding landscape for technology innovation in New York? What would you say the primary drivers and key providers of capital are in the US?
Yeah, so if I understood the question correctly, you're talking about the fundraising ecosystem in New York and I guess in the US in general. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. What you've seen is there's still a lot of dry powder out there. Dry powder meaning capital that's able to be deployed. This is either from commitments from LPs or commitments prior that are now sitting in venture capitalist bank accounts. But just having dry powder isn't enough. It's about deploying it in such a way that you'll get expected returns. Now, 250 billion has been available, right, in terms of dry powder. But in terms of deployment, people are estimating that only about 20 to 30 billion of that will be deployed over the next couple of years, as opposed to what's historically been happening. The reason being is that there's a difference between price and value that you're seeing in the market, and those two things aren't the same. Now, what's happened is before, everyone was chasing these big Series A, Series B rounds, whatever it is, seeing a high price on it. But now the discussion is moving to value, and you're seeing that venture capitalists are now asking tougher questions, and specifically, they need more to justify similar valuations. As we've all seen recently, I mean, Snapchat's shares fell 40%, Klarna took a down round. If you look at stock performances of Robinhood and all those companies, they're down almost 80% over the course of 12 to 24 months. So what does that mean? That means primarily the ecosystem is changing, not because there isn't enough capital, but it's just because there are fewer opportunities that present value to investors as opposed to anything else. So that's kind of how I'd frame that first part of the discussion. And then the second is also around trends that you see generically. So look at the macro environment and ask yourself what's happening around the world. You know, people are working from home more, which is pretty obvious, but what does that mean from a first and second or third principles perspective? The need for transportation, the need for, you know, different ways of buying products and services. Demographics are changing too. You know, aging populations. What does that mean for the types of services will be offered? I looked at a neobank recently that's specifically catered to the elder population, but you don't think of that, right? You think of a neobank like Monzo and Starling, you think of young, hip people, but those guys are seeing the growth rate of demographics at that stage. So long story short, in order to understand the current finance landscape, number one, you need to look at what is happening from a price to valuation and value perspective. And then the second is around long-term trends or shifts that are creating new opportunities or new markets for people to go into and get those exponential gains, which is what venture capitalism is all about.
So the next question is actually open to all of you guys. Are there any special programs that you guys have kind of put together? So Saka's just talked about New York and the US. Are there any geographies globally ahead of others in enabling financing to innovate nations? We can split this into two parts, actually. So have you guys kind of put together any kind of special programs which could potentially help startups and tech companies?
Well, one of the things we're going to be doing with, we're launching in September with Backable Ventures is programs specifically to help founders who are fundraising. And we will be training them in fundraising, but just supporting them throughout the journey, connecting them with VCs and investors who are actively looking to invest, especially with founders from underrepresented backgrounds. So that's what we're at the moment building. So any founders who are interested in getting in touch, we're bringing together some of the best VCs across Europe with the single aim of making sure that these founders raise.
Sure. One thing we're trying to do is events like this, but further, we're actually taking part in some workshops with different accelerators, reaching out to different programs as well. We cater to different needs. So we're constantly trying to share some expertise, for free. That's in the way we work actually. We don't take any payment or commission until money is unlocked. Again, so it's going down to this public form of funding, but which I can't hammer enough. You should use. So we're trying to reach out to as many sectors through as many different, avenues and connectors. So again, if there's anyone who would be interested to know more, who has access to a network of people that could benefit from expertise on this program, I'm just willing to reach out.
Saka, do you have anything to add?
Hi, yeah, truth be told, I heard about half of that question. Was it around the platforms or events or avenues for startups to find funding? Is that correct? Or
so have you started any kind of special projects to kind of help startups and tech companies with finding funding?
Oh, that's a great question. Number one, there are now alternatives to traditional venture capital funding. As we all know, to raise funds from VCs requires a lot of cold emails, trying to grow a network with them. It takes a long time. So alternatives to venture capital include things like revenue as a service-based platforms like Pipe or CapChase. So I always recommend to founders that, look, if you have positive cash flows and you have good unit economics, you don't technically have to take VC money. Now, I know that's against my own interest, but ultimately I care what's in the best interest of the founder as well. So where they can't take VC funding, I point them in the direction of those startups, which are growing exponentially. But then also in terms of, giving back my time, mentorship at Google for Startups or Kickstarts or any of these demo days or things of that nature, we go there and we give our expertise and share our thoughts and things of that nature to make us more accessible to startup founders that are trying to raise capital, that are trying to grow. But I think the landscape is changing now. There's VC funding. There are accelerators you can go to where VCs will come and mentor, so you get close proximity with them. There are events, so pitch days as well. I go for them all the time. So those are some of the ways that I'd look at that.
Thank you. Great. So second part of the question would be, do you guys know of any other kind of global or anywhere else in the world, essentially, that is kind of pushing their way forward for startups and tech companies to gain kind of investment or access to investment or free ventures?
Yeah, perhaps I could try there. I mean, certain places are doing certain things well. So for instance, the fact that I believe the Dubai and Qatari government are making it easy for anyone to get a crypto license and sell, or offer crypto products there, that's a positive step there. So from a regulatory perspective, that might be a great place to do business or to, have a startup that gets exposure or one that can get off the ground pretty quickly. But if you change directions and look at perhaps the UK ecosystem, yeah, perhaps it's a little bit more burdensome from a regulatory perspective, but there's also a lot more resources. So for instance, Tech Passport, it's a platform for fintechs to put their offering on the platform, and instantly they become a supplier for all the big banks that want to offer fintech services to their clients. That kind of stuff doesn't really exist in other places. So, there's a lot more assistance in that regard, or even grants, which are easily available in certain geographies as opposed to others. Here in the US, there isn't as much public support for venture capitalism, but the private sector does a really good job there. So accelerator days, Y Combinator, those types of things that happen here. So I'd say it really does differ based on the location, but I mean, the US is still a hot market. It'll continue to be just because of the size of the market. But don't discount Africa as well. I mean, in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to be looking there. It's deregulated, large market. There's a few things going for it there.
One other thing I can point to for founders in the tech world is, I know Brexit has, obviously impacted access to EU funds, and there's a conception that EU funds and grants are actually closed up now to British nationals. Actually, that's not entirely true. If your project can have a positive impact on one area or another in Europe, you can still apply for EU-based grants, which are quite good and generous as well, as the UK ones are. But I would say one thing: don't limit yourself to the UK. Even post-Brexit, it's still very much a very positive environment to access to the European market. A few more hurdles, but it does remain quite attractive and competitive.
I think both you guys have covered quite a bit. I think if I said in terms of, I would say that Africa is, I don't think we need to wait 20, 30, I don't know, we need to 20, 30 years, but I think what I'm seeing down there is they're going far ahead in certain sectors. There's a lot of interest already there. I was out in Nigeria in 2015 for a while, and I was literally blown away by how far they progressed in terms of funding, what the startups there are building. So I think the ecosystem out there is really, really quite vibrant. And I think that's what we need to, it's vibrant over here in Europe, obviously, but obviously a lot of issues come up if you are from diverse backgrounds. And that's what we're like. I can tell you that when I came back from Nigeria, one of the things I was like, well, hold on a minute, they're funding people out there. So what's the problem over here? So it can't be a bias issue because funding over there, so you've got to be funding over here as well. So this is what I'm trying to address. So I think over here, it's very mature, but what we need more of is check writers who are writing for diverse founders. I think it's happening over in the US a lot more. Exactly right, that you've got, people like that who've got, a lot of mainstream funds are coming in and writing for to diverse founders. I think what founders really need to do is look at scout programs. I think what's happening with scout programs is really, really good. if you can get connected to a scout for one of the big funds, they will be your champion. So don't overlook these opportunities out there. So in terms of that, I think just understanding where your market is, where you're looking to raise funds, and tailoring your pitch and your connection and how you break into or get the attention of investors. There's so many avenues in there. So yeah, I think there's a lot of options.
Okay, I'll hold this for a second. Final kind of question. Do you think that diverse founders have special considerations when it comes to fundraising? And are you aware of any initiatives or are you involved in any initiatives that address funding on underrepresented founders? Who would like to go first?
So even what I just said previously, UK, you've got initiatives like Black Valley, and Vine, Cornerstone Properties. You've got a lot of angels that are coming up and investing actively. So there's a growing network of funds, investors who are investing. But I think we need more of it, which is what we want to do, and drive just awareness of it, and just drive the fact that these founders from diverse backgrounds are exceptional founders. I really honestly believe that it's an untapped opportunity. In terms of, I think you've got still, I said Scout, but you've got so many initiatives out there that you can access. Underrepresented founders, without doubt, you're going to face barriers. Nobody can tell you otherwise. But as I said at the beginning, you've got to address it, I think, and I'm pretty sure some people will disagree with me, but I think that if you try to come at it from a different perspective, you can see a lot more success. That's my view. It's controversial, but I'm standing by it, and I see evidence of it. So yeah, that's what I'm doing with it.
One thing I can say is throughout our work, I've worked with perhaps 250 companies, and we work with founders from different backgrounds, and as you say, I think very inspiring people have actually used resources in the UK, developed technologies in the UK to then try and implement these solutions, back home. So some founders from Senegal and from Nigeria, there's actually one name a company, but they developed a way to report public issues to their local authorities in Nigeria. Nigeria, being such a huge country, huge population, is very decentralized and how to use the public infrastructures. And so we tested it actually in the first, I guess, case study was the quality of the roads. I actually tested it in north of London, near Chingford. It ran a pilot there, benefiting from some initiatives in the UK, and then managed to actually use that as the first MVP, but then implementing it in Nigeria. I think we're rolled out to 18 of the 40 states now. So it's quite interesting to see how you can have, you can try and have some cross usage of the technology development.
Saka, anything to add?
No, not really. Just there's a lot of resources available. And I know it is tougher raising funds as a minority. Yes, there have been 200 Black women that have ever raised more than $1 million in venture capital. That's in history. I mean, that's abysmal, right? I mean, you can't tell me there aren't more female entrepreneurs or there are Black women that should, that shouldn't or don't deserve to be funded beyond what they have been. So you will face barriers. In fact, the SEC released a report where they showed that if someone is of the same sort of demographic as you, you're 20% more likely to get them as an angel investor as opposed to if they weren't. I mean, controlling for every other factor. So look, there are barriers that'll be there, but that accounts for 20, 30, maybe up to 40% of the outcomes you'll have. The rest is determined by you. So you're going to have to reach out to more people. You're going to have to be a bit more organized. Unfortunately, that is a component of it. But there are specific avenues and resources available to you that other people might not have. So for instance, Google has the Black Founders Fund. Backstage Capital has something as well. I'm sure that, if you just do a quick Google search, you can find hundreds of these things. I go for them all the time. So right now, it's never been a better time to be a minority or underrepresented or female founder. but the stats are what they are. You know, the sooner we address that and look at the fact that less than 2% of all funding went to female founders, then that's a problem. We can address that. And I think it's okay to be head on about that, acknowledge it in your meetings and say that, look, we're going to make money, make returns, but also we can change the world and do well at the same time by promoting more diversity and all that. Now you're having a fruitful conversation, because if you just go in there saying, I'm a minority, you should fund me or whatever it is, you know, ultimately investors are after returns and numbers are numbers. So show them how they can win in two ways instead of one, by doing well and by also, you know, having good returns at the same time. I think that's the way to have the conversation, and it gives you your best chances of success.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to like kind of open up the floor to any questions. So if anyone has any questions, raise your hand. I'll give you the mic and let me know who it's for, or if it's for everyone. So any questions, guys? Are there any questions in the chat? Oh.
Got one in the chat.
All right, so we've got one from Andre. Do you find that many of the funds dedicated for minority founders don't actually have deployable capital, hence why their investment thesis and requirements of suitable startups are very restrictive, and therefore contributing to the hurdles companies like mine face when raising from the status quo?
Yeah, is that for me or is that for?
Is that for everyone, Andre, or anyone can answer? Everyone.
Actually, I think one of the things that that founders do need to, again, that the VC mindset instead of the founder mindset, is that when you approach funds, it's very important to understand where they are in their fund cycle. So a fund who's just recently closed their round, they have capital to deploy. They're going to publish it, it's going to be in the mainstreams. Go obviously target those funds. Other funds, if you are, and ask them, if you approach a fund, ask them the question. Where are you in your fund cycle? Have you raised? Have you closed? Because if not, you're wasting time. Really, there's two approaches. The first approach, funds that you know have deployable capital, those are the ones you want to be building real hard connections with and put them into your pipeline. But the other funds, same thing that VCs do. They will talk to you all the time because they need to build their pipeline. Deal flow is the lifeline of every fund. So you should be doing the same thing. Build your network, but just conserve your energy to know where am I going to spend a lot of my time and effort, and make sure that it's with the fund that have deployable capital. One of the ways to do that is to ask the question.
Thank you, Georgina. Does anyone else have any more questions? I can see Andre's hand.
Yeah, I just want to comment on what Andre also put in the chat, where he says, this is why there are loads of mentoring or an accelerator facilities, but they don't really increase our chances of securing funding unless we hustle very hard. And you're 100% right. Minorities and women, or the underrepresented, should I say, are over-mentored and underfunded. There are 100 mentoring platforms, Founder, Vine, I mean, you name them, they're out there. I think Barclays even has one. But when it comes to where the rubber meets the road and the money actually exchanges hands, there's still a gap there, right? So in terms of going to these minority VCs specifically and trying to get funding from them, there are two parts. The first is you have to understand that a lot of the VCs are considered risky if they're early stage investors. So you can even imagine that it's already risky enough to be early stage investors, but now you're going to have a minority focused VC, which creates the perception that it's more risky, even though it might not be, but it's just perceived that way. So I think there's a lot more due diligence, especially for an early stage company that's getting money from a minority VC that has to sort of prove and break free of the mold that you can't get returns or there's no opportunity for minorities or whatever it is. They have to make sure that they get great returns for their LPs. So they're going to be extra careful about who they invest in because they kind of can't afford to fail, to be frank with you. So when it comes to answering your question directly, it is more tricky. There is more due diligence when you're raising from a minority VC. It's not because they don't have the money, but they can't afford to lose. They can't afford to not win, if that makes sense. So they might do a bit more due diligence.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I have a question for you, Georgina. You mentioned the transition from founder to investor, and it made me laugh a bit because you were saying like you could see like when you was a founder, you was like, oh, why didn't I invest in it? And then when you became an investor, you actually realized why. And my question to you was, what do you think are some of the specific mindsets that are, or some of the specific things you found that holds a lot of founders back and keeps them kind of locked into that almost a bit, not selfish, but they're just thinking about themselves and their business. What kind of things do you think keeps them there?
I think one of the first things, I remember as a founder when I used to attend events and everybody say, you know, ideas are time doesn't. It's all about execution. And I'm like, no, ideas are still, you know, I'm literally all about, no, like start with the idea. Until I had to face, literally, for one idea, I would get 10, 15 pitch decks of the same idea. And I would like, I was like literally when they say, I remember I had, there was a founder I was speaking to, and he was like, yeah, but you guys invested in this person, so you should really invest in me. I said, okay, but what have you guys done? Well, you know, got my team together, we've done a lot, but we haven't launched anything. I said, okay, before, we were discussing a similar company, exact same business model, everything, but they launched, they've got traction, they've got customers. So you can imagine when, you know, and it was hard for me to explain, and I did say, like, look, go and launch, get something, because you need, this is what you're competing with. And the founder was really like upset. And I just thought, I moved myself. I was like, literally, so that's one of the key mindsets. Like, honestly, it's painful to hear. Ideas, I think ideas are seeds, they're great, but in the end, VCs are looking for who has the ability to execute. Like, who's going to be able to plant that seed and grow it? Not only that, the other thing they're looking for is you can raise now, but can you raise again? As I said, one of the most amazing female founder, because she really struggled. She came from a very, very non-decent background, and she was construction. You know, construction is a very traditional background, and it took her a long time to really adopt that mindset. Very hammering home to her, but when she did, I think one of the things that really helped her change, she realized, okay, I've got to speak their language because I'm speaking my language, and it's completely getting, you know, she's speaking construction, and she got construction, she was selling to her customers and she had traction. But for VC, they're like, I'm not really sure. So until she could change, just literally change the language, and then they got it. It was just a comparison saying, oh, my company's like this. Immediately they understand where it's going to slot into, you know, the market, and they get the business model. So all of those little things. And I think the third thing is just knowing that the barriers to entry exist for a reason. VCs need to make a return. They don't owe you the money. They don't even have money sitting in the bank account. When a VC says, I raised $1 million or whatever, the money is not sitting there. They've got LPs they have got to come back and report to. And those LPs will only release funds after they've agreed. So when you realize that, and then you come at it, okay, I've got to de-risk. And one of the risks may be that, because unfortunately, the problem with all this data is that it doesn't prove that investing in, and I hate to say this, but it's true, the data says Black females don't raise funds. The data says minorities can't raise, you know, but what that on the reverse, what it's also indicating is, okay, well, there's no data for us to show that they can make us returns. So the VCs that actually take the leap of faith to invest, they're still, they're still going to be waiting in the next 3-5 years to see whether those people they have invested in are going to make a return. So there is a huge obligation in every minority founder that takes VC investing or any investment. There's an obligation in you to make sure you bring in a return, because everybody behind you is waiting for you to prove that data, like to change the data to show that we can make returns. This is why I say when you go to Africa, what was shocking is they don't care about that because they're investing, and everybody there, like, yeah, they get the losses and the wins, but they're seeing returns, so they're putting money in. So what we need to do, I think what we need to do is start proving changing the data by having different narratives. And that's one of the things I want to do. One of the events that we're going to be I'm putting together is an event series where I'm showcasing founders who've raised, actually, minority founders who've raised and what they're doing in returns. Because I want to change that narrative in order to change the mindset to prove we do make returns and we are exceptional founders and we use investments because it's going to generate money as far as I'm concerned. So those are the things I think, if you think about it from that point of view and present and come at it from there, it might help you change minds.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any kind of questions for anyone on the panel?
I have one more question. I wanted to ask just to all three of you, like, how important to you when it comes to just fundraising and stuff, it's just pre-existing relationships like with the founders, like just having conversations with them, just knowing who they are, maybe months or even years before they actually raise anything or do a fundraising round.
Who wants to answer that first? Saki, you look very ready.
I'll talk about fundraising from two perspectives. So there's raising as a VC from my LPs, and then I guess there's the founder raising from the VC. If I'm looking to invest in a founder, I don't need to know them for 2 years, 3 years, it doesn't matter. Do you have a great company that's investable and that's de-risked? That's the first question I'm going to ask myself. And then number two, your character and your work history and all those things, which I'll get through references and whatnot. But it doesn't take more than a month or two in order to do those two things. So I don't think you need a strong or deep relationship to raise capital. You need a compelling case, because you can find VC email addresses or go on LinkedIn and find who the top people are there. But when you do reach out to them, what are you reaching out to them with? If you have a strong case, then it makes it investable. Because at the end of the day, venture capital investing is dispassionate. I'm not investing in you because I know you and we're friends. I'm investing in you because I think you have a viable business, good management team. There are certain things that are there. So I'd say that's between the VC and the founder. And then when it comes to the VC raising from LPs, a lot of family offices and high net worth individuals, they do want to build a relationship with you first, because, I mean, for a myriad of reasons, they're giving you a large amount of money. You're making decisions on behalf of someone else. It's not your money. A lot of them are relatively conservative. So these are people that have made their money previously, and now they're just trying to diversify. So diversifying is a conservative strategy. They're not trying to make money. They already have money. So, it's a very different calculus there, but I guess those are my points. Anyone else that has a point from the panel?
Yeah.
My humble experience as an angel investor myself, I agree. It's okay. It's not a matter of knowing the person. Actually, it's people that came across, that were interested in working together on other aspects. There was two key things: is knowing the technology that's being built can actually be coming from a passionate point of view on technology and science. That can this technology actually. One is in renewable energies, and having quite a lot of knowledge in research that is actually a genuine effort to try and bring green energy to an area that really needs it, or is this another sort of greenwashing? So being able to have access to the depth of the potential technology and understanding it made me really excited that I want to be part of it. And the second aspect was looking at the founder and thinking what attracted me with that person in particular was to think I'm very impressed in how he's already achieved what he's achieved, and thinking that, whoa, like how, trying to think, could I have done this, and to actually want to learn from you, as opposed to, so thinking like there's a lot of, I'm giving money, but actually I feel like I'm almost, it's really an exchange. I mean, as an angel, I guess I'm sure it's not something people can see at all, but as a point of like, well, I'm happy to take part in this project and support you, because I trust the technology and I think that the right, charisma and skill set to be able to drive this.
So can I just clarify, do you mean co-founding relationship with VCs?
Oh, like relationship with VCs, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I agree with both you guys. I think a lot of VCs though have this thing where I think angels are different. I think you can approach an angel a little bit more easier, and they're more willing to take risk. But I think the VCs, they do use their network as a vetting process. So you'll find a lot of investors who say, well, I will actually prefer to take a call from somebody who's been referred to me from somebody I know. And I remember speaking to somebody recently who basically said, well, all my deals come through referrals. And I just thought, how possible? So people have to know somebody who knows you. But I don't think it's as difficult as you think. I can't remember the name of the founder, but he basically got VC's attention by using LinkedIn ads. So he basically found out that this VC they're closing their sort of accelerator type thing, and he really wanted to get in, and he hacked his way through by basically creating a LinkedIn ad. I don't know if it'll work now, but it was really fascinating. So I'm like, I think so. He basically created a LinkedIn ad, posted it on LinkedIn, and just targeted the people that knew the VC. He said, if you know this VC, can you please tell them I'm looking for him and connect him? And I'll try to remember the name and maybe show us somewhere. But he basically, and the VC eventually got so many calls from everybody going, somebody's looking for you on LinkedIn. And eventually he was like, right, take that ad down. But he loved the ingenuity of that and spoke to the founder, but obviously the founder could back his technique up, and he invested in them. He's gone on to the companies now, billions, valuation. So that sort of be ingenious. There's different ways. Yes, they do have that referral system, but it's a way of vetting. But there's ways to get in, is what I'm saying. That story showed you there's various ways to get in.
Thank you so much. I think we have one more question.
Okay, so this is more targeted towards Georgina and Dr. Saka, maybe the rest of the panel as well. It's more of a question to prompt a bit of advice to founders in the room, essentially getting advice from the field. So a few years ago, I was raising money for a startup. I just sold, just a few months prior, one of my businesses. And around the topic of execution, 5 minutes into the pitch, the VC asked, so what are you up to at the moment? What other projects have you worked on? And all I said was, oh, I just recently sold a business. And I didn't even get the chance to go through 10% of my pitch. The next question was, okay, how much do you want? And the full check was given to me within 15 minutes of that meeting. I had to increase the valuation, tried their luck, as all VCs do. So my question really is, for someone who has not yet actually built a business and sold a business, what can people in this room, founders in this room, demonstrate to VCs to show that they have the capability to execute?
Love that question. Love that. It's so true. A two-time founder is, you go way up. You really do. I'll give you just a quick story. One of the founders, I met this amazing founder, I had the privilege of just being in the room and watching her pitch. Female founder, and because I could see the difference. So it was really funny. So we had two meetings. The first founder was the first-time founder, female founder. Obviously, nervous. She pitched, great business, and it went on to raise, but she was nervous. She could see the difference, and it required a lot of going back, questions. But the second-time founder, she walked into the room. The idea, I don't think, personally may not have invested in it, but she got the check. Because she walked into the room, not only was she a second-time founder, she commanded the room because she knows what she's saying. She knows exactly how to position it. And she'd already come in with checks behind her that she'd really raised substantially. So there is, again, that's the other barriers we face. And this is why I love this question. I think if you are a first-time founder, you have that in your mind, that you've got that, there are other founders coming who are second-time founders. I think the most important thing is traction, team. Do you have the expertise for this? Again, it comes down to my point, de-risk as much as possible. You've got to have something. Execution should be, is to me, going to be shown by what have you done? You've got the idea, but what have you done so far with that idea? Have you put together the amazing team? Right? This team, the only way it should be paid. Yeah, you have. You're going to put together a team, put together a team, and this team is the team that's going to build something. Has that team actually then gone ahead and done something with coming together? I mean, if you have that, and then you have to still be able to position it, because you can have all of these things. But it's what I said about this the second time founder. She commanded that room. I mean, we were just, it was myself, her, and everybody else in the room was male. But they literally, I don't think they were even listening to what she was saying. As far as they were concerned, where do we need to sign? Because they knew that as far as they're concerned, this is de-risked, right? It may not go on, but it's de-risked. So I think the last point is being able to then have all of those things and still be able to pitch it in a way that conveys that story and gets them to understand why you are the founder that they need to put their money behind. And that's what I would say.
Thank you. Saka, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Just real quick. In terms of making sure that a VC sort of trusts you, there are two different types of things they look at. The first is noise and the second is signal. So that VC invested in you because you showed him good signal. You've sold your company before and he was willing to write you a check because the market, or there was some validation and some signal that you were a good investment. So likewise, for a first-time founder, if they're sharing noise with me, which is we have 10,000 Instagram followers and we've been featured in Forbes and TechCrunch, that's great, but that's not signal for you being able to grow, manage, and ultimately exit a successful business. So the best way to do that is to share signal with me, which includes, as my colleague mentioned, traction. How many customers have you signed up? Of those customers, how many are paying you? Of those that are paying you, how many are being upsold and how many are just staying still? And if you aren't where you're at or where you want to be at, show me the roadmap, or at least your way of thinking as to how you would solve this problem. Because you're going to get problems along the way. But if you show me your methodology and way of thinking, I'll be more confident that you're able to navigate the tough times. But specifically, just share the raw data with me, your customer validation. How did you validate your customer proposition or value proposition? Show me how many interviews you did. Show me your numbers. All that is signal to me, and that's what will make me invest. So yeah, ultimately, you can still prove to a founder, or from a founder's perspective, that you're a worthy investment. It's just, don't BS people. Just be upfront, be straightforward, and kind of share what's relevant, if that makes sense, and they'll believe you.
Sorry, just to caveat that with one nuance. If, for example, the founders early stage, they've just come out of their career, they quit the job, can they use prior experience from, say, their past walks of life in their job? If they, for example, had an excellent sales record, so they know how to grow a book of clients, they know how to build a business function within a corporate. Does that have any value to a VC in terms of execution? So I'm sure that there are many founders who chase the dream, come up with an idea, may not necessarily have traction, but they really have got a very strong track record in their past walks of life. Do you think that has a play in the room when pitching?
It has a role. I don't think it's all too important if you're in a corporate versus being at a startup, because executing in a corporate is very different from a startup. But I'm curious what the panel thinks.
No, I agree. I think it's part of the team structure. So obviously, if you are X, becomes X, whatever, one of the big tech companies, well, that's going to move you ahead of the pack. If you have Stanford degree, Oxford, Cambridge, one of these things, that moves you a little bit further. So it's all part of the factors, but it's not, you're not going to come out and approach an investor and say, well, I just came out from this, but I haven't actually built anything. That, did you see what I'm saying? You still got to do risk, right? But it does, these are things you've got to be looking at. And obviously, if you have experience in the sector in which you want to build, that, again, is very good, because the VCs are going to say, okay, that experience is translatable. We can transfer this into the sector. So if you're coming from a completely different sector looking to go building something else, that's actually a risk factor, because how do we know you can execute that? So I think your experience definitely will play a part. But again, for people who don't have experience, just note that this is why I say think like a VC. You know that if you don't have the necessary experience, you don't have the necessary pedigree, fine. But how do you flip that? How do you make that work to your advantage? Well, I would focus on other factors, traction, building a team that maybe will minimize the weaknesses that you're looking at. These are things that the barriers are there, but you can tweak them, you can change them, you can not manipulate them, but you can maneuver your way around them. So I think that's the way to think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last question from Andre. Do you think that as a Black founder, we need to have a commercially perfect venture before securing any type of VC funding? Is it the same narrative for darker skin that they are perceived as something with more risk?
As I said, I'm going to be controversial because, okay, I'll tell you what I told the Black founder that I sort of brought in on a deal he's gone on to raise, was he had that mindset. He said, you know, I've been trying to raise for ages, it's been a problem. And I said, okay, but it's there, you're Black. No, it's going to change that. It's a little bit hard. Okay, like, let's move that to one side. Let's look at the other things, right? What he had going for him was he could pitch. Like, I put him into every single room that he went into. He pitched like it was, I've never seen anybody pitch so well, right? And so for me, I'm like, look, if you focus too much on that as the biggest barrier, then it's going to be a massive barrier for you and it's going to hold you back. But there are Black founders raising. That's the one thing I think of. Founders who are raising. The numbers are not great, but we are raising. And if you go to other countries where you see it, we're not the minority, we are raising the abundance. So what we need to do is accept the barrier for now. How do we overcome it? So basically for me, I would say, it goes back to what I've been saying, well, de-risk it. Have you built something? Are you out there look for a champion? Because one of the things that this founder was lucky, we were connected and I became his champion, and the minute he got that one ticket, everybody wanted it. Suddenly it was like, I've been trying to raise for ages, but now all of a sudden everybody wants to, get in on my deal. Why? Because I'm sorry, VC is kind of like a herd mentality. They're waiting for that one person to take the leap of faith. Once somebody does, oh, let's get in there. So I say look for the champion that you're going to find who's going to basically push your deal through. But in order to give them something to, because this is what I said, that founder, every single meeting that he went into, I was like, God, he smashed every single meeting. I had no doubts that he was going to that meeting. There are other founders that I sent to the same meetings and they fell apart, right? And that's fine, but like, that wasn't because you were Black. That was because you just, that day it didn't, and it happens to everybody. It happens to everybody. Just go away, get better at pitching, and come back stronger. That's the way I think about it. So yeah, as I said, it may be controversial, but I'm like, the barrier is there. I'm not taking away from it. I'm not minimizing it. But there are many other things that we need to focus on.
Quickly before I let Saka speak, I think what Georgina was more trying to say then, overcoming it then by changing the narrative, just kind of changing what you're focusing the problem on, because the problem isn't that you're Black. If you focus on that too much, you're going to ignore everything else that you have going through your product, your ability to pitch, your ability to kind of control the room. Those things you need to focus on, because that's what's going to actually help you in the long run. And Saka, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of my philosophy in life, but go to the people that choose you, not those that you have to debate or that are determined to misunderstand you. So by that, what I'm saying is go to where you have the best possibility of probability of success. If you're knocking your head against VCs in your local geographic area and they're just not listening to you, the world is a big place. Reach out to another VC somewhere else. Use debt as a funding vehicle. Use pipe or cap chase to fund your growth without having to give up equity. Find any other means, or find a source of funds that chooses you as opposed to you banging your head against one door that's not necessarily working. So that's probably my biggest thing. Your venture doesn't have to be perfect. And the reason why I say that is because to some VCs, your pitch will never be perfect, and you're going to spend time and energy trying to convince them that your pitch is perfect. Don't waste your time. They're non-believers. Like, go to where someone at least is inquisitive and asking questions. Oh, okay, so what about your market? What about your team? It shows that they're a little bit more engaged. Don't beat down doors that are completely closed to you. And again, VCs are not the end all be all. There's debt, there is angel investing, there is friends and family, there are grants, there's everything else. Your dream will succeed with or without VCs. We're here to serve you, not the other way around. Have that mentality and you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. That concludes everything for now. I'm so happy for everyone that's joined us and that's engaged. I hope it's been very informative. Everyone that's on Zoom, please do connect with Saka. I know there's LinkedIn in the chat. I'm sure you probably get access to the other panelists as well if you want to ask any questions. Talk money. But yeah, have a lovely evening or day. I have no idea what time it's for you guys are. For the rest of us, there are canapes and some food and some drink and some time to network. Round of applause for the panelists, please. Most welcome, moderators. Fantastic.
Well, I'll conclude by thanking you again. Thank you so much, Rihanna, for moderating the panel. Saka, Georgina, Maxima, thank you so much for your contributions to this. And to Glenn, I think he's already signed up, but Glenn delivered our keynote on private equity. That was quite an engaging conversation. And to each of you in the room, obviously, for remaining attentive and for your insightful questions. It's made it a lot more enriching for everyone that has participated. Those online, thank you for bearing with us on the technical challenges, but we thank you. And you'll be missing out on the jollof rice and plantain we have in the audience. So yes. I'll just close up as we shut down the recording. But for those that are still in the room, there's, as I mentioned, some food just behind to the right. And it's all vegan, so vegan jollof rice. Puff puff is vegan as well, but it's got flour in it if you're gluten intolerant. There's plantain, which is also vegan, and some cordial, ginger, elderflower, and apple. So thanks everyone, and Luke, and everyone that's been quite supportive. Charlie, Amechi, the whole team behind BCS Embrace. Really appreciate you all for helping to make this happen. Our partners today, obviously Msd UK, Carolina, Wira UK, thank you so much. I used to work for Wira, as I mentioned earlier, and it feels like, anytime I come back to Wira, it feels like I'm coming back home. And to the BCS, the organization that is working to make IT better for society, and Embrace, obviously focusing on it from a racial lens. Thank you all, and see you shortly.